Nora Callaway had a system for returned books, and she trusted it completely. Every volume that came back to the Millfield Public Library passed through her hands before it went anywhere else. She checked for damage, tucked in any forgotten bookmarks so they could be reclaimed at the front desk, and smoothed the pages that readers had bent out of habit or carelessness. It was a small ritual, and she performed it without much thought, the way you perform the things you have done long enough that they no longer require deciding. It was on a Tuesday in early October that she found the letter. It was folded into thirds and pressed between pages 212 and 213 of a well-worn copy of The Remains of the Day, which had been dropped into the overnight return slot sometime before she arrived that morning. The paper was cream-colored and slightly thickened, the kind sold in stationery sets, and it had been folded carefully, with deliberate creases. On the front, in handwriting that was neat but effortful, the handwriting of someone concentrating, were 2 words, "For Margaret." Nora stood at the processing desk and held it for a moment. The correct thing to do was place it in the lost and found tray, the shallow plastic bin near the door where umbrellas and reading glasses and the occasional child's sock accumulated over the course of each week. The letter would sit there until someone came looking for it, which they probably would not, and then at the end of the month she would transfer it to the general storage box in the back office, where things went that nobody claimed. She placed it in the lost and found tray and finished processing the morning returns. Then she went back and picked it up again. She did not open it. That felt like a line she was not willing to cross. But she turned it over, and on the back flap, pressed in small capital letters that had clearly been added as an afterthought, was a name and a phone number. Henry Walsh, 555-0174. She looked at it for the rest of the morning, not constantly, not obsessively, but in the way you look at something that is sitting in your peripheral vision, asking a question you haven't answered yet. At noon, during her lunch break, she called the number. It rang 4 times. She was preparing herself for voicemail when someone picked up. Yes, the voice was male, somewhere in its 60s, and sounded like someone who had been interrupted mid-thought. "Hello," Nora said. "I'm calling from the Millfield Public Library. My name is Nora Callaway. I'm looking for Henry Walsh." A pause. "That's me." "Mr. Walsh, we had a book returned this morning, The Remains of the Day, and there was a letter inside. Addressed to someone named Margaret. It has your name and number on the back." The silence that followed was different from the first one. Fuller, somehow. "I see," he said finally. "I wanted to make sure it got back to you," Nora said. "If you'd like to come in and collect it, we're open until 7. Or I can hold it at the front desk under your name." Another pause. "Was it opened?" "No," she said. "Absolutely not." "All right." His voice was quieter now. "I'll come by this afternoon." Henry Walsh arrived at 4:15. Nora recognized him from the membership photo on his library account, though the photo was several years old, and the man who walked in was more tired than the one who had stood still long enough to have his picture taken. He was tall, and slightly stooped in the way of tall people, who had spent years bending down to hear things more clearly. His hair was white, and he wore a gray jacket that looked like it had been pressed that morning as an act of intention. Nora was at the front desk. "Mr. Walsh?" she said. He nodded. "Miss Callaway." He looked at her directly, and she noticed his eyes were a very clear shade of brown. "Thank you for calling." She retrieved the letter from the lost and found tray and placed it on the desk between them. He looked at it for a moment without picking it up. "I've been returning that book for 15 years, he said, in the tone of someone who had not meant to say something out loud, but was not unhappy that they had. "Borrowing it and returning it. Margaret loved it. I never managed to finish it myself." He picked up the letter. "I wrote this in September. I don't know why I left it in there." Nora gave him a moment. "Is Margaret your wife?" "She was," he said. "She passed 2 years ago in August." "I'm very sorry," Nora said, and she meant it without qualification. He looked at the letter again. "I don't know what I was planning to do with it. It seemed important to write it down, and then I didn't know what to do with it after that." He gave a small, dry sound that was almost a laugh. "Leaving it in a library book isn't the most logical solution. People leave all kinds of things in library books," Nora said. "I once found a grocery list from 1987. He looked up. Was it interesting? Someone was buying an unusual amount of canned peaches, she said. I thought about it for weeks. This time he did laugh, briefly and genuinely, and it shifted the whole composition of his face. He came back on Thursday. He didn't check out a book. He sat at one of the reading tables near the periodicals section for about an hour, with a cup of coffee from the cart in the lobby, and when Nora passed by with a cart of reshelving, he asked whether she happened to know if the library had any recordings of classical guitar performances. She did know. She also knew that the audio collection was in a particularly confusing section of the catalog, so she helped him find what he was looking for, which led to a conversation about a guitarist named Andres Segovia, which led to a conversation about a record shop in Millfield that had closed in the 90s, which led to her mentioning that she had grown up in this town, and him mentioning that he had moved here 11 years ago for Margaret's work, and simply never left after. By the time she had finished reshelving her cart, 40 minutes had passed, and she was late for a staff meeting that she did not think she minded being late for. He came back the following Monday, and the Monday after that. It became a quiet pattern, the kind that forms without being discussed, because discussing it would make it into something that required a decision, and it was easier, and better, simply to let it exist. Nora began setting aside things she thought might interest him. A new biography of a composer he had mentioned, a documentary DVD about craftsmen in post-war Japan, a volume of Italian travel essays by a writer neither of them had heard of, which she had flagged because the cover seemed like something he would pick up if he saw it on a table. She left these things at the front desk under his name, with small sticky notes that said only the title, and occasionally one word, "Thought you'd like this." He always checked them out. He always brought them back with something to say about them. One Monday in November, he placed a returned book on the desk, and then set down a paper bag beside it. "There's a bakery on Caldwell Street," he said. "They do something called a hazelnut pastry that I think is the best thing I've eaten in 10 years. I bought 2. Nora looked at the bag, and then at him. "You brought me a pastry." "It seemed only fair," he said. "You brought me Segovia." She laughed. She took the pastry. It was, genuinely, extraordinary. In December, the library hosted its annual winter reading event, which involved fairy lights strung around the stacks, and a small table of donated books for sale, and usually about 30 people, milling around with drinks, looking at things they were not quite going to buy. Nora ran it every year, and every year she found it both pleasant and faintly exhausting. Henry came. She spotted him near the biography section, reading the back of a book he had clearly picked up, only to have something to do with his hands, and she crossed the room because she wanted to, and because she was allowed to want to. "You came," she said. "You mentioned it twice," he said. "I mention it to everyone. It's my job." "I know," he said. "I came because you mentioned it." Nora became interested in the middle distance for a moment. Then she said, "What are you doing for Christmas?" "My daughter is in Portland. I'll fly out on the 23rd. He paused. "It'll be the first one that feels something like normal. Last year was..." He didn't finish the sentence. He didn't need to. "Does she know you've been spending your Mondays in a library?" "She knows I've been returning a book," he said. "I haven't mentioned the rest." "What would you call the rest?" He thought about it seriously, the way she had learned he thought about most things. "The best part of the week," he said simply. She felt that sentence settle somewhere she wasn't going to examine right now, in the middle of an event she was supposed to be running. "Go buy something from the donation table," she told him. "It supports the children's summer reading program." "What do you recommend?" "The Italian travel essays," she said, straight-faced. "I've heard they're excellent." January was cold, the way January in Millfield always was, and the library was quiet in the specific way of places where people are keeping warm and doing very little. Henry's Monday visits continued. Nora began taking her lunch break at 12:30 instead of noon, because that was when he usually arrived, and she did not think either of them was pretending this was an accident. One afternoon, he brought back the Italian travel essays and placed them on the desk, and his expression was the look of someone who had been waiting to say something. "I'd like to take you to dinner," he said. "Not as a thank you for the books, or because I'm trying to make sense of anything. Just because I'd like to, and I think you might like to as well, and I've been trying to figure out how to say that without making it complicated." Nora looked at him for a moment. That wasn't complicated at all, she said. No, he agreed. It turns out it wasn't. Friday, she said. There's a restaurant on Heron Street that I've been wanting to try, and haven't had a reason to. Friday, he said. They went to the restaurant on Heron Street, which was warm and not too loud, and had a menu that was exactly the right length, long enough to feel considered, short enough that you didn't need to perform making a decision. They talked for 3 hours, which felt like one. He told her about Margaret, not with grief that shut the conversation down, but with the kind of openness that meant he had found a way to carry it. She told him about a previous chapter of her life, 6 years in a city that had never quite felt like hers, a relationship that had ended not badly, but just quietly, and a return to Millfield that had started as temporary and turned, somehow, into the life she was actually living. Do you like it? He asked. The life you're living. She considered it honestly. I do, she said, more than I expected to. What changed? I stopped waiting for the version of it I had planned, she said, and started noticing the one that was actually there. He was quiet for a moment. Margaret used to say something like that, he said. She would have liked you. Nora received that carefully, the way you receive something valuable. That means a lot, she said. Outside, it was cold and very clear, the kind of winter night where the stars are sharply visible, and the street sounds carry farther than usual. They walked for a little while without particular direction, their breath visible in the air, talking about nothing important and everything comfortable. At the corner of Heron and Fifth, where they would go separate ways, he said, I'm glad you called about the letter. I almost put it in the lost and found tray and left it there, she told him. What stopped you? She thought about it. I'm not sure, she said. It just seemed like it mattered, and I've gotten better at trusting that feeling. He nodded, and there was something in his expression that was very close to peace. The particular kind that doesn't mean the absence of hard things, but the presence of something good alongside them. Same time Monday, he said. She smiled. You can come earlier, she said. The good pastries sell out by noon. She watched him walk up Heron Street until he turned the corner, and then she stood in the cold for a moment longer than she needed to, looking at the very clear January sky, feeling the uncomplicated and specific satisfaction of a life that had arranged itself into something better than planned. Then she walked home, already thinking about what to leave at the front desk for him next week.